All right, Dave, we're live.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another Tooele Happy Hour podcast starring Jared Anderson and David Weiss, where if head trauma had a podcast, this is what it would sound like. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest today. We have our hopefully next governor of Utah, Phil Lyman. Phil, will you introduce yourself and tell our audience all about you?
First of all, thanks for having me on. You guys do a great job on this podcast. I've enjoyed listening to a few of them, and we'll listen to them in the future. So, yeah, I'm Phil Lyman. I live here in Blanding, Utah. Fifth generation Utah, born and raised here, and I got into politics a while back, kind of motivated by some really heavy-handed stuff that I observed in my own community here, and decided I'd run for county commissioner, and then saw some more stuff, and went through a time where I was protesting the BLM that means Bureau of Land Management, where I come from. BLM for some things, and they decided to press charges against us, purely politically motivated, and so I've got a taste of the justice system. Ended up doing some time in jail, actually, and got a pardon from Trump, and I got a mugshot before mugshots were even cool, and then ran for the state legislature just to kind of keep the trend going, and see if I could get some things changed at the state level. So most of my political involvement, it stems from my business activity and desire to see things done better, and observing how sometimes people's lives are unnecessarily damaged by bad policy decisions. And so I've been in the state legislature now. I've been there for 4.5 years, and decided we're going to give it a shot at running for governor. I think there's an opportunity here. I'm not real thrilled with the leadership or lack of leadership that I see in this current administration. So we're throwing our hat in, and we're going for it.
If I can take a minute and kind of recap what I know of what happened to you with the BLM was you got arrested by overreach stemming from the Obama administration over kind of the Bears Ears area, right? Wrapped up in that.
Yeah,
we don't need to go into too many details, but the ATF wanted to make a point, and they were looking for sheep to slaughter, and you and a friend of yours got caught up in that, correct?
500 of us that went on the protest that day. 500 people from Blanding, which is a quarter of the population of the town almost.
Yeah, if you don't count people that live in the unregistered areas outside of town.
Yeah. So there was a lot of people that were there, and between the event on the Saturday and the night before, there's probably 600 or 700 people that were involved, and it was a really great event. We told the BLM, I called them first thing after we decided that we were going to have the demonstration, I'll call it, really just trying to get some answers from the BLM on the charges that they've levied against a few other people in our town. So yeah, and that was in 2014 that we did that. We'd had one in 2011 as well, but in 2014 it happened to just fall a couple of weeks after the Bundy standoff in Nevada, and so they were determined to make another big scene in Blanding, and we could kind of see that unfolding in front of us. And so we were very, very careful, made sure that we didn't break any laws, didn't do anything that was too provocative. But it was 6 months later that they charged me and 4 other Blanding men for trespass, misdemeanor trespass, and conspiracy to trespass.
See, they failed at the Bundy Ranch because it got media notoriety, and yours was kept pretty quiet. And I think had there been a specific target, I mean, not to go off out on a ledge, but Obama's administration showed showed that your government does not care about your property rights. They don't care about the property rights of the citizens. They see everything within the borders as belonging to the government. And that's specifically what they did when they went after the Bundys. And that's what they did with the Bears Ears. And so
Yes.
I think you were honestly, the BLM got a black eye at the Bundy Ranch because of all the media attention drew in from around the nation people who said property rights matters. And they wanted you guys to take a fall so that they didn't have a loss on their record as their last game. And so they came after you. And
Yeah.
for that alone, the BLM should be shut down, warehoused, and there should only be one organization that sullies those initials and not two.
Hey, Phil, how did they treat you in prison? Were they
Amen.
giving?
Yeah. It was a really interesting thing. I appreciate the question. No, I was totally a prisoner, and I went there. They did let me self-report. So the judge, by the time, so they wanted 2 years. They wanted me to go away for 2 years. And the mantra on the Wasatch Front was, Tim DeChristopher did 2 years, so Phil Lyman has to do 2 years. It's like, well,
Who's Tim
not fair
DeChristopher?
to. He had protested the Bureau of Land Management with the lease sale, so he was kind of on the other side of it. He was an environmentalist that was, protesting their lease. So he went in and bought up a bunch of oil leases fraudulently a few years earlier. And I totally respect Tim. That's why I say it's not fair to me or Tim to compare the two of us in this situation. But by the time it finally came to sentencing, and I had four federal judges recused, from the time that I was convicted in a kangaroo court to the time of sentencing, my judge recused and three others recused. So the chief judge had to do the final sentencing. And by the time he got there, he had actually read the case and said, yeah, 10 days, which was like music to my ears because, I've moved property around and everything. But going through the whole process of being charged and convicted, and then they want your transcripts from 8th grade on. They want tax returns forever. They want all your property. I mean, anything that they want, they just demand it of you. So that, and this is John Huber, the U.S. attorney at the time, and he was I guess acting attorney, soon to be U.S. attorney in Utah. And they asked him, "What are your top priorities? What will be your top priorities as U.S. attorney?" He said, "White collar crime, illegal drugs, and recapture Canyon, because we want to show commissioners that even commissioners are not above the law." And really, what he wanted to do is send a message to commissioners: don't mess with the BLM, or you'll regret it. And spent several $100,000 in attorney's fees. And so by the time I got to jail, the 10 days was the most pleasant part of the whole experience. But it was very, very real. Getting booked into jail was, it was humiliating and intended to, really intimidate, and it kind of dehumanizes you, and they give you a number, and that's who you are. And I've told people I met some really unfriendly people in jail. None of them were inmates. The unfriendly ones were the guards, and they like to harass and intimidate, try to pick fights, and it's just like, and I'm there. I'm a mild mannered accountant. Most of the people that are in there, rightfully are dealing with some kind of an addiction, for the most part. So I wasn't, but I made a lot of friends there who were inmates, and got a feel for what jail is like. And so now at the legislature, when jail issues come up and they talk about inmates and felons and things like that, I have a little bit of street cred, I guess, to say, these are people, they've got kids and wives, and really most of them just need some help, some attention for an addiction problem that may or may not have been their fault. My cellmate, sorry to go into all this, but my cellmate was, just a really great young kid, and he had a car accident on graduation night and blew out his hip, and had big plans to join the military and be a linguist, but he ended up getting addicted to Percocet because that happens. It's a very addictive substance, and they grab him and put him in jail to wait for his hearing. And while he's sitting there waiting for his hearing, for 3 months, he loses his job, he loses his girlfriend, he loses his apartment, he loses his car, and you can just see it's like, man, this is going to be rough on Jacob when he gets out. And but I mean, that's the system. I'm not critical of the people that run the jail. That's their job, but the whole system is kind of a prison mentality. And so I got an inside look at that, and that would be, honestly, is one of my top platforms is prosecutorial misconduct and reform of the justice system, because it's a serious problem. They have weaponized the Department of Justice, and we're starting to see some of that nationwide.
It's been weaponized for, well, you could probably argue it kicked off weaponized. I think prosecutors, if they have been found to have done anything dishonest, there needs to be a severe punishment for that.
Absolutely. Yeah, people, cornerstone of our society, to have a justice system that if you haven't done something criminal, you don't need to worry about being prosecuted. But man, that's not the case in this country. A lot of people being prosecuted in this last 3 years for having done nothing criminal.
I think the way it ought to be done is, there's just spitballing, is defense attorneys and prosecutors are both officers of the court. So do away with prosecutors, do away with prosecutors' offices. I think that prosecutors should be hired from the attorney pool, and the state will put in as much as the defense can put in for theirs for the prosecution of the crime, and just equalize the courts. Step away from making the courts a game where wealth can determine your guilt or innocence, and make it so that it's a 1-for-1. So if the defense can come in and say, okay, I've hired this lawyer, books are opened, okay, they paid $100,000 for this lawyer, the prosecutor is another lawyer that's hired, and this is how much they're going to pay. And if they get a public defender, I believe it should be a public prosecutor.
Right. So they assigned me a public defender early on from the federal they call them the Federal Defender's Office. I didn't know anything about that, and I didn't want them, and I told them, no, I don't need a public defender, but they said, well, we've got all the resources of the federal government to defend you, and you're going to need that because you're going up against all the resources of the federal government against you. And so I turned in my honest affidavit of income. It's like, I don't qualify for a public defender. There's no way. But they gave me the Federal Defender's Office as representation for about 3 months, who was kind of the lead for all 5 defendants. And then John Huber came in and argued, before the judge 3 times before the judge, that I was not qualified, that I didn't qualify for a public defender. And when finally, went to the judge, and I said, you're the one that assigned them. You're looking at the affidavit. It's honest. It's fair. And I said then I didn't feel like I qualified. She said, yeah, you're right, you did. But then she took away that public defender. And so then I went and hired an attorney. But what it did is it set everybody back 3 months, deprived us of any of that, of the work that those guys had done. You reset right before you go to court. And in hindsight, it was like, I think it was a total ploy, not on the public defender's part, but on the U.S. attorney's part. And yeah, it's crazy. It's fun. I didn't plan this, but I'm sitting right here. I've got this book. I don't know if you guys have seen this, License to Lie. It's by Sidney Powell, who she's got her reputation tarnished a little bit, but such an amazing book, about prosecutors, and they can go into court and they can lie with no fear of any repercussions. They can
Well,
fabricate things. They can cut deals with your defense attorney without you
yep.
knowing it.
Remember the most famous case was the Duke lacrosse team case, where that
Right.
prosecutor completely he fabricated stuff. It was weeks into it that he found out the truth. And then he just fabricated the rest because he wanted that big win because it was an election year. That's another thing. We got to quit electing that office. It needs to be public. The state goes out and hires a lawyer commensurate with the lawyer that the accused can hire, and the same amount of money is spent. And then I think both sides get together and they both bring in the same expert at the same time. The same expert, that guy comes in and just lays out his expert opinion, and it's up for the jury to decide which side that expert opinion goes for. Instead of the state gets to go find this, $1 million expert that they'll dump on the court, and you're left to go, well, I've got $1,500 to get this guy down in a trailer park in Alabama to talk about it. But anyways, we don't need to make this about your case, even though to me that's one of the most interesting things. I think our judicial system is broken.
I'm glad you can recognize that,
Yeah.
because that puts a really human experience onto your platform.
It does. It does. You need to get some T-shirts made like Trump has with the mugshot. Just throwing it out there.
Well,
but
I've got it. I did make a mug last year. I was sitting up there about a year ago. I was sitting in a committee meeting up at the state capitol, and I've honestly I've been embarrassed about the whole thing. Not that we did what we did, because it was awesome. It was wonderful, and it was a great feeling. BLM afterwards was complimenting me. Hey, that was a good job, and we appreciate you keeping the peace and everything. So. But I was sitting there, I was embarrassed that I lost that case because I shouldn't have lost. Of course, it's federal court. And like my attorney said, take no comfort in the fact that you're innocent. This is federal court and it makes no difference. And but sitting there, and I thought, you know what? I got a mugshot, and my friend Monty has a mugshot. So I grabbed those things and I sent them off to some printing company to put them on some coffee mugs. And I gave him about 8 of those for Christmas, and he just loved them. And my friends, they really like theirs, and so I
perfect.
do have a few mugs floating around with my mugshot on it, and
Well,
it's felt kind of good. Plus, I got a pardon,
Yeah.
after the whole thing, and after President Trump, was not elected in 2020, quote unquote. Uh, um, I thought, because somebody had told me you can't get a pardon for a misdemeanor. Somebody close to them says you can't get a pardon for a misdemeanor. I just kind of took that. But when he lost the election, I thought, you know what, the president can pardon anybody he wants for anything. So I texted Mike Lee and said, hey, I'm filling out this application for pardon. Would you be willing to write an affidavit? Thinking maybe he'd say yes, or maybe he'd say no. But he was like, absolutely, 100%. I am on this. I won't turn loose this. Jason Chaffetz, who is no longer in Congress, he's a good friend of mine, and I texted him and asked him, and he jumped right on it. It's funny because I called Jason. I guess I called him to see if he would be willing to do that. He just texts back, "Hey, sorry, I'll call you back in an hour or so." So I told him what I wanted in a text. When he called me back, he said, "You're not gonna believe this. I was golfing with President Trump when you called me." It's like, oh, well, I guess we know somebody that knows President Trump. And anyway, the whole thing has been just really, really eye-opening. And I'm a guy that there's something about injustice that I just can't not do something. And so all of this stemmed from watching my own community get raided in 2009, right after Obama took office, and a good friend of mine that took his life, to try to protect his wife and his daughter from further prosecution, and 300 federal agents knocking down people's doors in Blaney, Utah is a big deal. And but I don't know. I couldn't not do something. And I feel right now, I think if I had not done that, I don't know how I would feel about myself. So going to jail, paying that price, in a way, maybe it's cathartic for me, maybe it's selfish of me, I don't know. Whatever it is, I feel better having stood up. So
No, that's good, and I won't go as far as to say Obama is a communist, but he's definitely a tyrant who had no respect for the basis of a prosperous nation, which is property rights. It's the only way to have a successful nation.
right,
And
no, you're correct, and I feel the same way.
he had no respect for that. And for that alone, I think, he should be pilloried daily in the media. But of course, the media is his mouthpiece. I don't know why the president's office needs that Jean Pierre lady. They just need the rest of the media up there. But
I think after that interview with Tucker Carlson, the last thing Obama needs is a mouthpiece. But that's besides the point.
Anyway, so let's get into. We've gone over your history, and I think it's an interesting one. Honestly, I think that it needs to be put to paper. A book needs to be written about it because it's an interesting story, and it shows corruption. And I've let my feelings be known on this before, is that the conservative side of the United States, up until about 2008, about the end of Bush's term, didn't know that this stuff was happening. This stuff has been happening. It happened to the left and to minorities. It did happen. I'm not going to be one of those that say it didn't. After that, Obama's reign in, it still happened to minorities, but it turned its eye real hard on people who desired traditional rights and respects of the United States. And let's not forget whistleblowers. Obama tried more whistleblowers than all the rest of the presidents combined since Eisenhower. I think the only president that beats him is either Lincoln or Coolidge, or not Coolidge, Lincoln or Wilson. Those are the only two that beat him. But anyways, it's just me shooting off the hip there. But let's talk about your campaign now.
At the same time that was going on, I just wanted, Lois Lerner over the IRS, they came out with their policy that we found out after the fact, what they called financially ruinous audits of conservative nonprofits. And, stuff like that. It's like that was going on. That was happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And people don't know that. All they know is they tried to get their nonprofit off the ground and the IRS wouldn't give them the time of day. Or worse, they had a nonprofit that got audited into oblivion. And then you find out it wasn't
targeted
for cause. It was a program. So yeah.
Yeah, it was targeted. And honestly, why someone wasn't tried for that, I'll never understand.
I think you understand.
Right.
But the problem is our government, even the conservatives in our government, won't go as far as to try someone under those circumstances because that's a black eye on the government. And I'm not talking politicians, I'm talking the bureaucratic side. They can't lose their place because if they lose anywhere, they all lose. And it's about time they lose.
Well, that's why they talk about, we don't want to undermine the confidence of the people. It's like, well, maybe be a little more trustworthy. If you want their trust, maybe do some things that are trustworthy.
What is this confidence you speak of? Because I have zero confidence in our government. None.
Right.
None.
And the founding fathers didn't have confidence in the government.
No,
That's
they
why
didn't.
they wrote the Constitution.
No, they didn't.
It's like they know what government does and will do and always has done. So the fact that we're supposed to have, this unyielding confidence in the government, it's like that's contrary to America, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, you're 100%.
So Phil, if you're elected governor, what can the people expect differently than what they're currently getting from Governor Cox?
Let's start off with, what are some of Cox's deficits that you seek to correct? What are you seeing that he's doing? I know I have my own opinions on what he's doing, but what do you see he's doing that you would like to correct?
Well, so much deference to the federal government and to President Biden through COVID. It was just is excruciating to see Cox parrot exactly what was coming out of the Biden administration. And just end of last week, announcement came out that 5 governors were joining Governor Newsom in establishing the climate corps in their states, and all Democrats except one, and it was Governor Cox. And it's like, why are we doing this? Why do we elect Republicans and then Democrats run the state? His judges that he's appointed have been Democrats. A few weeks back, President Biden went to Arizona and designated the Arizona Strip a national monument, which took away the nation's uranium, or locked up the nation's uranium reserve there. That's the uranium that feeds the mill in Blanding, Utah, just south of me, the only uranium processing mill in the United States. And so it's hugely devastating. Could end a lot of jobs. Definitely changes that thing. Comes up to Utah. Before he gets to Utah, the FBI go in and shoot Robertson in his home in Provo, shoot and kill 75-year-old man that can't get out of bed, after breaking through his window in a flashbang. And then the governor goes out and takes these selfies with President Biden. And I said this in Provo, and somebody said, well, are you saying if you're the governor, you wouldn't have met him at the airport? And I said, oh yeah, I would have met him at the airport, but it would not have been a friendly meeting. And that's the part that is confusing to me. It's like, why do we have a governor who seems to have such respect for the president of the United States when the president of the United States seems to have zero respect for Utah, for that, that boundary that defines the state? It's like, it meant something in 1896, and it still means something. And so I guess those are some of the deficiencies. What I see missing is that commitment to statehood. And it's probably been missing for a very, very long time. It didn't start with Spencer Cox by any means. But hopefully it ends with Spencer Cox, and hopefully we get to a point where we say, whatever we've been doing for the last 100 years in public lands, maybe it's time to change that. And as you said, Jared, to tell the BLM where their services are no longer needed.
And the FBI.
Not in a sovereign state. So,
if the FBI is going to show up and not going to, by any means, try to find a peaceful resolution, I mean, the FBI went into a cul-de-sac and went on assault mode when simplest thing they could have done. Why didn't the local sheriff or even a deputy go to his house first?
Yeah. The other thing that I've noticed, and I'm not making accusations, but for example, when that kid up in Kaysville was shot and killed by the police.
The sovereign citizen
what is going on
kid.
here? Well, they had officer footage. They had body cam footage that he pulled a gun. Apparently, I haven't seen that. So they're saying, well, this was a justified shooting. See, we've got the footage. But when it's not justified, they just don't have the footage. Why not show? Okay, if you were justified in that, if you're saying that Craig Robertson pulled the gun, do you have that on video? Is there some documentation of that? So we're just supposed to take their word. But when the tables have turned, yeah.
Even if he did pull a gun, he pulled it inside his own home.
After they come through his window with a tank.
After they assaulted his home.
Flash bang.
Now that could have been a totally different animal, and from what I understand, the sheriff down there wasn't notified.
No, that's my understanding too.
And that should be a law. The sheriff should be notified of any action, federal, anything in the county. The sheriff should be notified if a city police is doing an operation, because the sheriff is the elected law enforcement officer. He should be notified, and they should be tried and charged for it.
Yeah. There's a Anglo-Saxon tenet of common law that says any power which, if abused, might tend to the oppression of the people, that power must be delegated by the vote of the people themselves. So it's like, if someone's going to come into my house and shoot me, I at least should have the opportunity to unelect that person, or at least my neighbors should if I'm gone. But and you don't have that with the FBI. You don't have so then the FBI comes in and says we're doing an investigation. It's like, well, we don't want the FBI's investigation. We want the sheriff's investigation.
Well,
and I think the
yeah.
sheriff's department is doing one. So
Good. Well, the FBI was going to investigate themselves. Well, what do you know? They found they did nothing wrong.
Well,
You know,
if they do investigate and arrest those FBI agents, I totally support them, because I don't want these weird agencies going in through people's houses over Facebook posts.
all the sheriff can do is write a paper on it. Honestly, because we have let our law enforcement agencies fall to the priority of Washington, D.C., and we need to wrestle that back. The sheriff needs to have ultimate control. We need to wrestle that back, and I don't know how we do it.
Yeah, these kinds of discussions, they start to sound, anti-police or conspiracy theory, when what it really is talking about due process. Where is the due process? People, if they can't stand up and demand due process, if they can't go to the Capitol on January 6th to say, we observe things that really, really concern us about this election, without fear of them being, prosecuted, put in jail. I mean, those are the signs of a banana republic. I mean, I thought it was so ironic. A few weeks ago, Biden came out and condemned Putin for imprisoning his political adversaries. It's like, I mean, it's like, who can you not see the irony? This is, right while they're going after Trump and indicting him, but anyway.
At least Putin's honest about it.
Well, speaking of the FBI, how about the last three Whitmer kidnapping people getting acquitted 2 weeks ago? The only people that got time out of that are FBI informants. I'm just saying. So I don't know how that panned out. But yeah, the FBI needs to be. The FBI should have been torn down while Hoover was still alive, because it was a busted, corrupt institution then, and it's still the same busted, corrupt institution now. It was born in forgery and deceit, and it's living that way.
Yeah, I saw something this morning, a meme that said something like, things are not getting worse, they're just getting uncovered. And I think there's some truth to that. We're just finally starting to see what's been happening all along. We find out, the stuff that we took at face value 8 or 9 years ago is just a total cover-up. And that's the way the raids were in Blanding in 2009. It's like, there's no truth to it. People that lived here were just, wondering, why is this happening? So
why didn't Utah media cover it? That's the big issue. Utah media should have covered all of that along the way, which is the Bundy Ranch. The media covered it thinking they were making the Bundys look bad, but it drew a whole bunch of support to them. So the media here in Utah were nil on it. They were mum's the word.
Yeah, the media is so aligned with like the U.S. Attorney's Office, and I've got stories about that I won't go into, but just, totally lockstep, like carpooling down to, investigate somebody while the media goes out in front of them and destroys their reputation and creates that image. And they work together, they talk together, they choreograph this hit job on people, and you don't stand a chance when they decide they're going to do that to you. It doesn't have to have any truth to it.
They were probably all in the same dorm in college, so that's where it comes from, But anyway, so Cox is expressing that when he was elected, and Utah's got a bad score on its election ratio too, especially in that Cox race. There's a lot of distrust that race was legitimate on the up and up. But Cox has shown that he is he's a normal Utah governor. He bends to the feds. Utah governors always want to look good to California for some reason. And that I don't get. California's a failing state. Why do we, you want to look good to them, keep Salt Lake clean. You know what? Here's a side note. I was in Boise 4 weeks ago, and Boise is beautiful. It's clean. It was what Salt Lake City was 10 years ago. Clean, organized. It wasn't a nightmare to park anywhere. It was just, and now Salt Lake is kind of a dingy mess. And that shows
Really, really interesting.
we've got to quit following California.
It's interesting that the homeless situation, it really is a quandary, because we're Utahns. We care about people. We would not stand by if somebody needs help. We would help them. And when you're talking about homelessness, downtown Salt Lake, that's a combination of typically drug addiction, mental illness, maybe some criminal behavior. But you've got a lot of people addicted to drugs that seem like they can stay down there for months and months. And I don't know where the drugs are coming from, but they are coming, and you can see that. And that's a deliberate attempt to destabilize a city like Salt Lake. I have no doubt at this point that is a manufactured scenario, because you see it across all of the big democratic strongholds. They're just trying to demonstrate how horrible America is, when honestly we're not horrible at all.
No, just leave the major cities in America is as close to perfect as you can get.
Yeah, yeah, and you've got those pockets that, and again, they're very blue cities that have these biggest problems, and yet we start drafting policies that take us down that same path in a red state. Doesn't make sense.
No, it
Doesn't
doesn't.
make sense.
Okay. Well, I cut Dave off on his question, so let's lead into it. What can the people expect from you? You get elected governor. What are you going to strive for?
Well, they can expect that I will stand up. I'll stand up for what I believe and what I say. If I say I'll do something, I will do it, regardless of the consequences. I'm all about limited government. The Constitution guarantees every state a Republican form of government. That means government by the people. And we have a really good system for that. So talking about public lands, people have said, well, how could Utah ever manage the public lands that the federal government manages now? And I say, well, there's these really interesting subunits called counties, and they understand the land that they live in, and they're responsible for the health, safety, welfare, law enforcement of those counties. They can manage those public lands better than the federal government can. But that's the way the Constitution set it up. Same thing whether we're talking about public lands or public education. Those decisions are decisions that should be made by the people most affected by those decisions, not by someone far away with no political accountability. And I would push that as a governor. I think one thing, having been in the state legislature, if I were the governor and the legislature sent me a bill that gave some general guidelines and said, just let the agencies use their rulemaking authority to define the rules on this, I'd send it back to them. I'd veto it and say, go back and do your job, legislature. These agencies aren't elected. They're supposed to just follow your instruction. And so the legislature, I would empower the legislature. I'd empower counties, push the hierarchy of power and things back to as close to the people as you can get it, and then just send the message to the people. This is your government. Get involved. Right now, the message is, hey, we got this. We've got really smart people. We know what pandemics are. You don't. We know what masks can do. You don't. We know what vaccinations are for. You don't know these things. And if you don't listen to us, you're the problem. You're the threat to your neighbors. That whole narrative goes away, I think, when you start flipping that power structure from the people up instead of from the top down. So I mean, I've got a whole list of areas and things and kind of an agenda, but that's the main thing is that we have a Republican form of government where the people who are most affected by decisions are the ones making those decisions.
Hey, Phil, are you receptive to nuclear power, or would you say you're averse to it?
I got another hat sitting right here. I started the Yellow Cake Caucus when I got in the state legislature. I started the Yellow Cake Caucus, because my district was Kane, Wayne, Garfield, San Juan, Grand, Emory counties. These are uranium counties, and I should just answer the question, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
I love nuclear power. If environmentalists are honest, they have to they have to embrace nuclear power because it's the baseload power that doesn't have carbon emissions, that will meet all the demands, and Utah is in a really great position to you know get into that field.
There's even a company somewhere here in Utah that's making like mini reactors and trying to test out that technology. If I'm correct, and I'd love to see projects like that just pop up in Utah and embrace them with open arms.
Yeah. Yeah, Yellowcake Caucus is we'd meet during the legislative session. I bring people down from the Idaho National Labs, and they talk about the small modular nuclear reactors. Utah actually has signed the first contract to get one of those in Emory County. When I was county commissioner, I was very instrumental with getting the San Rafael Research Center there, which we'd love to turn that into kind of a national labs. But you get into thorium reactors and the molten salt reactors and the medical isotopes, and it's such an exciting uh, area. And equally exciting is what they're doing with coal and with gas. If it's emissions that you're afraid of, it's like, well, these power plants today can produce electricity with zero emissions out of biocarbons, uh, hydrocarbons. Sorry. And the last time there was a permitted uh, refinery in the United States was in 1977,
Yep.
and it's just beyond. So Utah should be energy independent. We've got the power in Utah to power the whole Western United States if we would unleash that.
Wow, I could just see my energy bill going down if you get elected.
Well, not just that, but if that smooth brain moron in DC wants electric cars, we need nuclear. That is the only way we can support it, because we can't support it with natural gas. We don't have the natural gas production anymore. We can't support it with coal because, well, his homegirl Clinton shut that down. We and Obama. It has to be nuclear, and if they want that done, that's the only avenue we have. A wind turbine
So
isn't going to do it.
Yeah, fun fact on Bears Ears. That's where a lot of the Uranium One claims were located. And Uranium One is the company that Hillary Clinton sold to Russia back in 2012.
Didn't she do it
Through Canada.
through Canada? Her and
So we were in
Canada
negotiations.
ganged up. Yeah.
Yeah, we were in negotiations on the Arizona Strip, and Uranium One was one of the biggest funders of trying to keep the Obama administration from putting that all under a moratorium. And they showed up one day and said, "Hey, this is our last meeting. We got bought by Russia." I was like, "What? You got bought by Russia? Explain that." Yeah, Hillary Clinton brokered the deal. We got bought by Russia.
Yeah.
And everybody's just like, "Well, that's weird." But then you see, as this plays out, and you see national monuments laid on top of resources and protecting Russian interests over American interests. It's a global move.
It's almost like it's a conspiracy to tear a free nation down, isn't it? I mean, what nations, globally, what nations do they go after? They go after Poland. Poland's a big target and they go after the United States. They went after Libya when Libya was playing with the gold dinar because it was going to slip out from under the control of the World Bank. We saw how that panned out. Libya's doing well. Don't worry, guys. I mean, look at it. We're sitting in the middle that, I don't know, there was a French doctor during the French Revolution, well, before the French Revolution, that invented a machine. And we don't need to go any further into that.
So Phil, let's change the subjects to illegal immigration. That's always a fun one with candidates. So I'm watching DeSantis buy transportation and passage for all these foreigners from other locations to travel the United States and see pretty cities and stuff like that. And I'm just wondering, what's your opinion on what DeSantis is doing, and if it's different, what is your opinion on illegal immigration here in Utah?
Well, if I'm following right on DeSantis, it's refreshing to see New York declaring an immigration problem, because they just assumed that was Florida's problem or Texas's problem, and so the fact that they
Arizona.
ship them on up to New York, or you know, wherever they ship them, to create that problem at the place where everybody's
Not to create
promoting that.
not to create the problem, to
Redistribute?
deliver
Yeah.
their request. That's what they did.
Yeah. No, thank you. Yeah.
New York said, we want this. And Texas and Florida said, okay, here you go. And
Here you go.
and now New York's going, oh, we wanted you to pay and deal with it. We wanted you to suffer the financial and economic consequences from it. We didn't want it. We wanted our opinion to affect you, which is why, again, the 10th Amendment is the only way that this nation can remain for another 50 years.
That's right. That's right.
No way
so in
should
Utah.
Yeah, there's no way California should be making decisions for Utah. Yeah, I shouldn't be able to make a decision that California has to pay for.
I've heard a few people in Utah say, "Well, why the strong stance on immigration? We're not a border state." It's like everybody's a border state.
Yep.
We are all border states, and we're all affected by it. And I appreciate people that are willing to come and do jobs that some others aren't willing to do. And there's ways to come here and do that, in an organized fashion. Even some of the illegal the illegal immigration that takes place is done with, at least with proper, I guess, kind of motives. Like, this is what we do: we come up, we pick fruit, we go back, type of a thing. But the neighborhoods, I mean, in Salt Lake, you've got neighborhoods that have houses where it's just there's vans coming all times of the night. That they've got 12 adult men living in this house, and they rotate through. And I've had that from probably 6 different people that have come and told me, this is happening in my neighborhood. I'm watching this happen. So again, we know what we know. What we don't know is what is driving this whole thing, and why are they, in South Jordan, Utah, and Salt Lake and around, and what's the agenda? So it's same thing with China coming in and buying up land. We're all for free market. If you want to sell your land, sell your land. But if you find out that someone has got a plot to take over the country, well, then somebody that understands that should step in. And what you have now is the Biden administration that would sell the whole country for $1 billion and be happy that they made out so well.
Well, I don't know. I think the Biden's numbers have gone up since Ukraine, but just saying, I think Biden had taken a look at his portfolio and his numbers have gotten higher. But enough about laundromats. No, and it's not to say that the immigrants are bad, because they're not. I do think that we have a screwed up immigration system. Why don't we have temporary worker permits that are easy, where a guy in Mexico or Honduras or wherever can't find a job over here, sign up for the job accepts him, and then those two work out his transportation here, getting his green card, someone's taking ownership of him. He works for that few months, and then he goes back. Why can't we do things like that? We used to. This nation was built on that all through the early 1900s. And, I couldn't imagine what Hugo Chavez would be doing right now if he was alive. He'd be screaming, because he fought for the rights of the legal migrant workers against the illegal migrant workers. And then our nation says, we'll just run around that and shut that down.
Well, they make legal immigration really, really difficult, and illegal immigration really, really lucrative and productive. It's like, I guess you get what you pay for.
That is true. That is true. So what else can they expect? You said they can expect you to withhold decision making into elected officials' hands.
So I mean, let's talk about education.
Yes, that's
Parents have authority. They have authority over their kids. Who should make decisions for your children's education? You should make those decisions to the maximum extent possible. So the curriculum that's in our schools, a lot of it's there. The curriculum that we're not favorable towards is there because it's part of a federal program. You don't get the money if you don't put in the curriculum. We don't need the federal money. Utah's budget right now, in 2010, we were at about $10 billion budget in Utah. We'll be pushing $30 billion in 2024 for that budget. So nearly triple the budget. We haven't tripled our population, but government has grown dramatically. We'll be pushing that, and 28% of it is federal. So if you say, well, we went from 10 billion to 30 billion and 28% of that is federal, take out the 28%, you still go from 10 billion to 20 billion. You've still doubled the revenue, and Utah it's an economic engine. People criticize the legislature for letting the budget go so high. Well, half of it's because we turn around and by the end of the year, the businesses have done even more, not because of the government, but in spite of the government, because they're such good people here. But we could easily say no to the federal money, and especially like the COVID money that they're planning to send out again. Really respected DeSantis to say, we don't want it, keep it, we don't need it. Why would we shut down, in Utah, a $250 billion economy for a little payout to the state that's going to go into expanding the footprint of government in the first place? It's like we could do without the federal money, and that would be a main focus is to look at those programs and just say no to that stuff.
I like that. Well, how would you set up our design of our education system? Because here in Utah, we have Salt Lake County. They want to hang all of the multicolor flags. But then you get down there where you live and they probably want a lot more conservative education. And maybe they want to have some horticulture and animal science back in schools, things like that. Would you make it a state controlled by the legislature, or would you try to break it down where school districts maintain control, where the voters have a direct path to that? What do you think would be the best way to manage that?
I mean, it's a lot more complicated than just saying it, but school choice is the answer. That parents have a choice where they take their kids, and the money goes with them, not stays at the public school. And if you want to go private, then you get to pay for both. And we passed a bill last year that really strengthened school choice. And a lot of the school districts were really upset by it. But you know what? It hasn't harmed them. It gives parents the ability to say, not just vote with their voice by going to a school board meeting where they're likely to get, treated as domestic terrorists.
That's how you get introduced. That's how you get introduced to FBI agents nowadays.
Yeah. So you just take your kid and you say, we're going to this charter school or to this private school or homeschooling, and the money goes with them. And I think that's going to be a real key part of it. And I guess just to say, so many amazing educators and school teachers and committed people, committed administrators as well, but they need to be accountable. If they're not going to deliver the product that the parents expect, then the parents have every right to go someplace where they're going to get that.
That can cut both ways. You might have a school down there in Blanding that teaches a more conservative system, and the parents might want to hang the flag in the classroom, so they might pull the kid out or find a school that accommodates that. But I think you're right. I think the liberty should be for the parents to decide the education plan their child is on.
Phil, I want to...
When they want to... No, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I wanted to ask you a question in regards to freedom and free market. That kind of parallels this conversation about people deciding for themselves. This is a question that can go either way for you in your campaign. I'm not sure, but the free market and free choice, that's a big thing in the Mormon religion. They call it free agency, and we like to talk about free markets here in Utah, but here we have an institution that is called the DABC, or was formerly known as, that that practices a little bit of socialism in terms of a particular niche in the market, alcohol. And you, as the governor, I mean, I'm sure you will have a little bit of a say in how that institution plays out if you are elected. And I would like to know, what would your opinion be if somebody put a bill across your desk saying, hey, let's just give this back to the free market?
I would support that 100%. I don't know why Utah is in the alcohol business. And I'm probably a little more libertarian minded on a lot of those things than some people might be comfortable with, but I much prefer the inconveniences of the free market in that space than I do, regulation. Regulation is the biggest source of corruption because it gets enforced for some and not for others. And so just open that up to the free market. It would do well in Utah, and I think Utah is ready for that change. I've never really understood why it hasn't happened before now, but I think Utahns are ready for that.
I think you're right. All right, Phil.
I guess I'll add to that. I'm quite a big fan of the proper use of cannabis, medical cannabis, the properties, some good things that does. It's one of those things that, as a health benefit, that shouldn't just be thrown out and criminalized. And that does two things when you start looking into that. Is you start taking away the criminal stigmatization of cannabis. You bring in the hemp products like rope and paper and all these things that Utah should be leading out, building products. Some of the hemp products that I've looked into are just phenomenally, effective and durable and fireproof and, all of these things. Yet when we bring them up at the legislature about, using hemp products to do your countertops in your house, one of the first things that comes up is, well, we don't want people to accidentally get high from this. It's like, well, no, that would help if we got rid of some of that stigma and just look at it for what it is. And, so I would go there too, and the jails that are full of people who've been convicted on marijuana.
Oh, how about your cellmate? What if your cellmate was able to pursue pain relief through marijuana? He could have probably had a better chance at not falling down the opiate trap. That's another thing.
Yeah.
And not to mention,
absolutely.
Henry Ford built doors and fenders out of hemp for those cars he made. So that's just something to remember. But Phil, we've had you on for almost an hour. Can we go through some listener comments with you?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So Deborah Tate, she says, haven't seen you in a long time. It's nice to hear your side of all this rather than hearsay from blinding people. You know how it was / still is. Good to see you still fighting for what is right. So it sounds like you and Deborah have at least a personal knowing each other relationship.
She's from Blanding. Yeah, she knows what Blanding's about. So
small town.
Yeah. So hi, Deborah. Yeah, it's a small town, and the Tates are, good people, prominent people, and so Deborah's a friend, and she knows.
Well, Deborah, hi.
What it's like.
Glad you sire from a good, prominent family. And I think Tates are good people anywhere you go. I know a few up here. All right. Patricia says that Cox is a Democrat. And worse than that, all our governors seem to look to California for the blueprint on what to do, and we've had that forever. I mean, I can, as long as I've been alive, and that's sad. What are your thoughts on that, Phil?
Yeah, and we elect Republicans, and then Democrats kind of run the state. I I've known Spencer Cox for a while. When he was a legislator, he was much more outspoken, in favor of public lands issues and kind of freedom and those types of things. I don't know what happens to a person when they get in there. I saw it with Governor Herbert a little bit too. I think they really want to be liked by everyone.
Yeah.
And so they play a little bit more to the middle rather than sticking to their base. I ran a bill to censure Mitt Romney back in 2020. Yeah, when he voted to impeach Trump. So I guess it would have been 2020. I think it was 20. Sorry, I was sometime there at the beginning. I guess it was 2019 when he voted to impeach Trump. And yeah, it was amazing that the blowback I got. We don't want to vote on this. It'll cost us our election. We live in a swing district, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, well, if you're not going to take care of the base, if you're not going to take care of the Republicans that elected you, you're going to lose their support after a while. And I see that happening. I see that the Republicans are getting disillusioned with being told one thing and then seeing something else play out. So
Yeah. Well, or could it be that we elect someone to governor from somewhere outside of Salt Lake City, and then they move into Salt Lake City and they're surrounded by it? Maybe.
Right. Yeah, you wake up every morning to the same
Yeah.
things. Yeah, could be.
Yeah. All right. We Are the People says because of 15-minute city plans, and I've seen a lot of this going around. It's kind of the new thing that a lot of governors are running with. They want to build these cities that make it so that they build a pedestrian paradise. To me they look like a prison, but that's what they're trying to build. I do my damnedest not to go anywhere near Salt Lake City, and I couldn't imagine living in a place that's a 15-minute city.
Well, the concept of a 15-minute city is that you can track your criminals anywhere within 15 minutes and corral them into a particular corner and keep them contained.
I think that's the public becomes your criminals.
No, they would just do that to criminals.
Yeah. The whole surveillance society that we're getting into with facial recognition and digital ID and digital currency. And then these 15-minute cities. I mean, the idea of being able to walk to the grocery store, that's not repulsive to anybody. But the idea of having no choice but to stay within your 15-minute city and be controlled on every aspect. It's however they paint it, there's a hook in that. And if you bite down on it, you're going to find out that it's something other than what it looked like to start with.
Right.
Living that close to population sounds like my worst nightmare. It just scares the heck. I don't like populated areas.
Hey, Phil.
Again, manufactured. Yeah.
You brought up a term that I have to kind of highlight. Now you said digital currencies, but are you someone versed in the difference between a centralized digital currency versus a decentralized digital currency?
Yeah, I think I understand the difference. A Bitcoin, publicly sourced, versus a central bank digital currency. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you saying, do I prefer?
Well, just
non-centrally.
Some people don't understand the difference. The word cryptocurrency and digital currency is thrown out there by the media, and everyone starts to hate Bitcoin, but they find themselves embracing Fedcoin as the app starts to come out or something like that. And I just think that it's a pretty dirty game the media is playing, and I just like to make sure my candidates are aware of the difference and how terminology will play into the social engineering.
So there was a bill that came up on blockchain, and Utah was saying, well, we want to get into the blockchain space so that we can regulate blockchain because it's dangerous. People can lose their money in blockchain or in digital, Bitcoin and things like that. And I said, it reminds me of Rage Against the Machines when Paul Ryan was using their song and they reached out to him and said, "Hey, could you please stop using our song? You're the machine against which we are raging." And I said, the idea that Utah is going to come in and create a blockchain regulated company is completely anathema to what blockchain companies are, which is free. I said it's like going to the zoo instead of going to the jungle if you want to see some wild animals. And I said we don't want to regulate the jungle out of place. I've been a huge fan of Bitcoin. I've watched that go. I've been part of it. I'm a CPA, so I kind of saw that. But then when it shifted into this single ledger economy, then you do have to start to look at who controls the ledger. At some point, who's controlling that? And if it's the central banks that are controlling that, it's pretty frightening to me. The fact that they could turn off your currency is just that can't ever be a good thing.
Yeah, look what Canada did. That's nightmarish.
Right.
They can
it's
just
not theoretical. We watched it happen. It was crazy.
Yeah, I mean, what would we call the next Holodomor if we let them have it? That's the question, because that's what they'd be able to do. They would be able to starve you into compliance. That is funny. They're like, people can lose money on Bitcoin like they don't lose money on taxes every year. Anyways, We Are the People says they are.
You're going to lose money on taxes. So
that's a good point.
Bitcoin gives hope.
That's a good point. But, but Bitcoin, you stand a chance of not losing money on taxes. It's guaranteed. At least Bitcoin, you're voluntarily gambling. Taxes are like they force you once a year to go to Vegas and feed a one-armed bandit for 4 days. Or I should say for 3 or 4 months out of the year.
Yeah, not for you.
Yep. We Are the People says they are intentionally making parking and space for cars impossible. He also says they are flipping Ogden, Bountiful, Logan, etc.
And he's referring to the immigration problem.
No, I think he's talking about it might be immigration or the 15-minute cities. I think he's talking about the 15-minute cities though. But he'll correct us later on. Kish says Phil for governor. And
Kish.
Yeah, we all know Kish. Great guy. And yes, I second that, Phil for governor. I am not pleased with Cox's performance. Heather Garcia says, that's awesome. She thought you were running for Romney's seat. I think the guy running for Romney's seat to keep an eye on is Trent Staggs.
Possibly Tim Ballard.
Oh, yeah. Possibly Tim Ballard. If you don't know, he's the guy who did the Underground Railroad thing. OUR. But Phil is running for governor. And as much as I appreciate a senatorial person of a conservative stripe, we need our governors more than we need our senators, because our governors at least have some power. Our senators seem to be deluded out of being able to accomplish much. And it's sad to say. Sorry to say it, but yes. So we're seeking Phil for governor, and that's just a note to Cox. You had the ball, you ran it down the field, and you failed.
And he hides in the shadow when we try to ask him for interviews. So
either way, he's failed. He's bent over to the feds too much, and
yes,
that's just. I want Utah to be prosperous. When I leave Utah can do what Utah wants, but for right now, I want it to be prosperous. I don't want it to be California light or Colorado light. I want it to be prosperous. I want it to be logical, and I want to cut federal money out. We can manage our own stuff. Kish says we need a bill that only allows one flag in schools, the American flag. Yes, or you know what? I would be okay if we did away with the Department of Education and only had the Utah flag in schools. And we can pledge allegiance to your state because I'm a 10th Amendment guy. Call me crazy.
You know, it is interesting, the Pledge of Allegiance. We say it proudly, and I say it proudly.
Mm-hmm.
But when you sit and go through the words of that, it's like, number one, it wasn't, from the founding that we said the Pledge of Allegiance.
No.
And it's like, it's not the flag that I have allegiance to. It's the country and the republic and
my neighborhood, my family.
50 sovereign states. That
The Pledge of Allegiance
together,
was written by a socialist Christian.
I know.
Under God was added in during Eisenhower's term to fight against the communists. All that stuff is stuff to think about. It's interesting, the history of the Pledge of Allegiance.
I'm learning a lot about you, Josh. You know a lot of stuff. So.
Yeah, it's crazy stuff. Where are we at?
I think it's it. Yeah.
You're good. Okay.
Jared, Josh, whatever.
Yeah. All right, Chase Leavitt or Levitt. You know Chase. Chase.
He's our conservatine.
Yep, the conservatine. Though a couple more years he'll be the conservatwany. He says, Phil is awesome. It was great interviewing him yesterday. Can't wait to see what the future holds for him in our state. 100% agree. Yes.
And Chase, you should plug your interview.
Chase.
Plug your interview. Don't be ashamed.
Yeah, share it right in the notes.
We have no shame. You should have no shame.
Yes. Kish says.
That was a fun interview with Chase.
He's a smart kid. He is a very smart kid.
He gets it. It's nice to see kids that, I shouldn't say kids because he's an adult now. He's 18.
Yeah.
That's draftable age.
He gets it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Kish says, where's he at? Okay. Our chat keeps jumping here. Phil, how do you see some reform for homeless funds we currently spend? 10 million. Can we work at a better fix?
So I know when I'm talking to Kish, I'm talking to a guy that he doesn't preach it. He practices it. He goes out on Thanksgiving. He goes out on Christmas. He takes care of homeless people. He understands. He cares. He loves them. He spends his own money. I mean, there's a guy that really puts his money where his mouth is on that. So I don't want to tell Kish how policy should go, other than that is the right answer, is to care for these people, and to to arrest somebody's criminal behavior is not doing them a disservice, it's doing them a service. If there's criminal behavior, we should care enough about our community to arrest that behavior. If there's people that have mental illness, we should care enough to fund the clinics that care for them. And if we care about them that they're drug addicted, then we try to get them into a program to help them rehabilitate. I don't believe there are very many people, I'm sure there's a few, who really prefer the homeless lifestyle for whatever reason, maybe retaliation against society or something. And those
or
people,
just freedom.
I've talked to a few of them that, it's freedom. Yeah. And they're living it. And so I don't want to deprive them of their freedom, but those that are in a tough spot, especially drug addiction, I see that as really driving that whole thing nationwide. And so that's not really a full answer as far as like where the funding goes, because I'm not sure how much money is being spent on homelessness and how to address that. But it's definitely a problem, or I should say, it's definitely a circumstance, a condition. It's definitely a condition that could be improved upon.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we need, if I was to put in my 2 cents, I would say we need a strong, vibrant economy and a healthy housing market. So we need to get regulations out of housing as much as we can. $20,000 to cut ground to build a house is ridiculous, because no one's going to build what we should consider a single family home for $20,000 with the $20,000 loss right off the top. You can't eat a haircut like that at the bank. You just can't. No one's going to build a $150,000 2-bedroom, 1-bath when you're going to take a $20,000 haircut. So we've got to figure out how to absorb that. And then Chase, he shared his interview with you. You know, we are the people. Feel free, if you've got interviews, share them on here. Share them on the happy hour page too. We want to get Phil's information out there as much as we can. We definitely need to fight for our state, and right now Phil's stepping up to be our boxer, to be our champion, and you know. And then if Phil gets in there and he says, "Boy, I like what Newsom is doing," we'll find his replacement. But hopefully you won't. So
well, if I do, you come down and get me out of there as fast as you can. I can't imagine that.
You'll be closer to us then. We can make it there to you in like 35 minutes if you do.
Right. Mike
Peterson, he says, "I've known Phil for 40 years. He's a real deal. He is the man we need in the governor's office." And so,
thank you, Mike. That means a lot coming from Mike. He's one of the best. He's one of the best friends I have, and one of the best guys I've ever known. So, good man.
Yes. We are the people says decentralized can be just as bad depending on the system. The WEF is pushing decentralized.
What is WEF? World Economic Forum. They're probably, they are probably one of those international bankster type organizations.
Let's just lay it out. The WEF will make a dog poop sandwich and tell you that it's just extra crispy peanut butter. So if the WEF pushes it, it is not decentralized.
And then the next comment is centralized is obviously bad.
Yes.
So at least you stand a chance when you're decentralized.
Yes. Well, our central bank, I mean, the central banks have been the doom of nations. Andrew Jackson, for all his faults, became the president to beat the central bank. And it was beat for quite a while until Woodrow Wilson drummed it in again. And then even on his deathbed, he postulated that he sold his country down the Whit River. So,
and the best case scenario would be not to ban one particular currency, but let them all have their opportunity. If the dollar, the centralized dollar, is the best, and you know, let's accept multiple currencies like Bitcoin and the dollar, like El Salvador does, and we'll let the free market decide. I think the idea that we should only have one currency, one example of how we should exchange and measure our wealth is a very dangerous idea. It's like having one crop that feeds us all, and one bad parasite comes in and wipes it out. You know, it's a good example of a healthy economy is something that has diversity.
Not to mention, when the government outlaws guns, they'll be selling guns in Bitcoin. That's a guarantee. Not that I would know anything about guns. I'm not a gun person at all. But, you know, I know there are some people who are.
And then he clarifies at the end here, we are the people states that 15-minute cities are smart cities.
Yes.
And I think Governor Cox knows that too by now.
Yeah, they're super smart. Anyways, everyone, let's thank Phil for coming on. We hope to have you on again. It'd be fun just to really do a show and dig into the circumstances that surrounded the Bears Ears and lay it out. I remember when I first heard about it, and it is it's a situation that boils my blood when you see the government turn its eye of Sauron against its populace, you know, and it's awful.
I've got a presentation on that with the big map with overlays that is really effective, and when people see it, it's pretty blatant.
I would love to have you come on and do that presentation and host it.
Do it.
Yeah, we'll put it out there.
We should do it.
You know, and it takes things like that. We got to start poking holes in the government. This is what your government's doing. We're not going to rein them in if we allow CNN to ignore your story and Fox to, kind of mention it. And on the flip side, it's not going to be good if we allow CNN to build up other stories of corruption that fits their narrative and Fox to ignore it. We've got to do it ourselves. Our fifth estate has failed us, so we've got to become the new fifth estate. It's just that time.
Right.
Phil, thank you so much. Everyone, let's thank Phil. I'm excited for the new election. I'm glad that we've got a serious champion on the field that we can push forward to fight for us, because Cox hasn't been showing up. And you kind of saw that start to come on when he was lieutenant governor, but you're really seeing it now.
I'm excited to have a Phil Lyman campaign sign in my lawn.
Yeah.
I'll get you one.
You'll have to.
Those are forthcoming. So yeah, go, and my website's up, lymanforutah.com. People can go there and read a little bit more, and it's getting more content all the time.
I'm going to tell you right now, Phil, if you're bringing signs up this way, you're going to need to bring a semi truck. Honestly, Cox is not an honored person up here in Tooele County. So bring a lot up. This is a county of hunters. This is a county of people who
love the Second Amendment.
Well, it's not just that, but and we should get into this another time. We got to let you go. But the hunters have a schizophrenic relationship when it comes to public-private lands, which is rough. But that is definitely something a needle that would have to be threaded. But
and it can be done. It can be done with good common sense input from the people that are affected the most. So
yeah,
I will say too, just a real quick plug for your great representative. You sent us Tim Jimenez, and that guy's a rock star. I love Tim. Very, very smart.
Oh yeah,
very conservative, and very he likes the truth more than he likes the popularity. So Tim's been great. So
well, you're gonna have to tune in.
A little county for that.
Tune in on Thursday, Phil, because Tim's going to be on the show. We're going to talk about why are gas prices so high in Utah when we produce it and refine it right here in the state.
Yeah.
So that's going to be our conversation on Thursday with Tim Jimenez.
You want to hear a funny side note? So the mayor of Grantsville, I run into him at Home Depot. I'm shooting the breeze with him. I don't know if you've met him. You should come out and meet him. He'll put together a town hall for you. Neil Critchlow. Well, I run into him, and then Tim comes walking by, and we see Tim, and we're laying praise on how good he's doing in there, and he's talking about, well, he's not going to do it for too long, and we both promptly explain that we're not going to let him stop running because he is a good representative to send into the Capitol. He really is. I told him I'd come in the middle of the night and kidnap him, and his campaign would be him holding up today's current newspaper because I would force him to run. But we got lucky. We've got Tim out here, and we've got Bridger Belinder out here, and both of them are exceptionally.
Bridger is awesome too. Yeah. Two freshman legislators that really, move the needle in the legislature. So.
Stand-up guys.
Thank you for that.
Hey, and then we're going to send you into the governor's office, and then I think we'll finally meet Utopia, and it'd be like Eve never ate the apple. I'm just telling you. It'll be perfect.
Yeah.
But well, Phil, thanks for coming on. You have a wonderful time. If you ever want to come back on again, just reach out because, we're big supporters.
Thanks, Phil.
Well, thanks, Jared and Dave. Really enjoyed talking to you. Anytime.
Yeah, that's great. And you'll hear from us again soon. We're gonna stump you as often as we can.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. You have a good one.